Hi guys, you're welcome back to my channel. My name is Stella. Alright, so in today's video we're going to learn how to draft a proper pencil gown. Alright, so when I say proper, I mean a gown without any form of squeeze or fold around the knee part. Alright, so that's what we're going to be looking at in details, and we're going to draft this from the scratch. Alright, so let's jump right into the process. Now I went ahead to divide the widest part of her body into two. So the widest part of her body that we're working with is her hip round. Now if yours is your bust round, you can go ahead and divide it into two and you add 2 inches. All right, so we're making use of her hip round divided by 2 plus 2. Okay, so I simply just highlighted it. All right, so that's the only thing I have done. Now let's proceed to label this block. Okay, so here is our center back line. All right, and here is the center front line. Okay, so we will start with the back. Now we're working with a neck width of 3 inches. We're working with a shoulder of 15.5. and 15.5 inches divided by 2 will give us 7.75 inches. All right, and the standard neck depth for the back is 1 inch. So I'll go ahead and make these marks. All right, and I'll connect it using my curved ruler. Okay, now the standard back slope is 1 inch. All right, so I'll go ahead and make a mark on the 1 inch shoulder slope for the back and I'll connect it. So this is what we have for the back. Now let's move over to the front. So we're working with our standard measurement of 3 inches neck width, our shoulder measurement of 7.75 inches, okay, and the neck depth of 3 inches. Remember, to get your own neck measurement, go ahead and divide your bust round by 12. Okay, the 3 inches, 3 by 3 is not a constant. All right, now the front shoulder slope is 1.5 inches and that is also a standard. All right, so I'll go ahead and connect from the neck width of 3 inches to the 1.5 inches shoulder slope. Okay, now the next thing we're going to determine is the chest line. All right, and to get the chest line, you're simply going to divide your bust round by 6 and you either add 1 inch or 1.5. Now let me give a little bit of explanation, because someone asked me why is it that sometimes I make use of +1 and another time I make use of 1.5. Now this depends on the style you're working with. Okay, so if you're making a free dress, all right, you can make use of your bust round divided by 6 plus 1.5. But if you're making a sleeveless dress or an off shoulder, I usually make use of my bust round divided by 6 plus 1. All right, this is to ensure that your armhole is not that deep. Okay, it's better for you to have an armhole that is a bit high, okay, and you reshape it further. All right, so that's the only explanation for that. Okay, now let's proceed to mark her chest line. So to get that, I simply did her bust round divided by 6 plus 1. Okay, and I'll proceed to mark it. Now we're working with a bust round of 37, so I divided 37 by 6 and I added 1. All right, and that gave me 7.1 inches. Now I added the 1 inch back shoulder slope to it and it gave me 8.1, and I have marked this across. Okay, so here is our chest line. Now on the chest line you need to remark your shoulder measurement. All right, and we're working with a shoulder measurement of 15.5 divided by 2 will give us 7.75. so I just marked it on the front chest line and on the back chest line. All right, and I'll go ahead and connect that to the shoulder slope. Okay, now I'll make use of broken lines because we don't actually make use of this line eventually. All right, so I'm using broken lines to connect both the front and the back armhole line. All right, and here we have it. Now we'll proceed to mark all our vertical measurements. Now we have a detailed video on how to take measurements, okay, and the process. So I will encourage you to go and see that video if you have not. Now let's go ahead and mark all her vertical measurements. All right, so I'll come in with my tape and I'm placing it on the starting point. Pay attention to where I'm placing the tape. It's not on the shoulder slope. So her bust point is 10 inches. All right, I'll go ahead and make a mark there. Now her waist length is 17.5 inches. All right, I'll make a mark there. Now her hip length is 26.5 inches, all from the starting point. All right, so I'll make a mark there. Now her knee length is 35.5 inches. Okay, and I'll make a mark there as well. So I'll go ahead and repeat this same measurement from the center front. So we're marking a bust point of 10, her waist length of 17.5, hip length of 26.5 inches, okay, her knee length of 35.5 inches, and I'll proceed to connect all these measurements. So this is what we have. Now we'll proceed to label these lines. All right. So here is our chest line. All right, and here's the bust point line. Here's the waist length, the hip length, okay, and the knee length. Now the last line there is the full length of the dress, okay, which is 44 inches. All right, so we'll proceed to mark the back vertical measurements. All right, so I have my tape placed on the starting point as well, and we're going to go ahead and mark the back waist length. So the waist length of the back is 16.5 inches. Okay, now for all your vertical measurements on the back, you need to subtract your bust dart. Okay, and the bust dart for this gown is 1 inch. So I'll subtract 1 inch from all our vertical measurements. Example, from the shoulder to the waist length for the front is 17.5 inches. Now, if you subtract 1 inch bust dart, we will have 16.5 inches. All right. So all the vertical measurements that we marked on the front, I'll proceed to subtract the bust dart of 1 inch from each of them. So we're marking a waist length for the back of 16.5 inches. The hip length is 26.5 inches instead of 27.5 inches. All right, and the knee length is 34.5 inches. All right, all for the back. Okay, so now for the hem as well, instead of 44, the dress length is 43. Okay, so we're subtracting 1 inch from all the measurements. Now I'll repeat the same thing on the center back as well. Okay, and I'll go ahead to connect all these measurements. All right, so here we have it. Now we'll proceed to label, but the labeling is exactly the same thing with what we have on the front. Okay, so here's the chest line for the back, waist length for the back, the hip length, okay, for the back, and the knee length. Now if you pay attention, you will see that all the measurements are low, they are lesser by 1 inch, okay, which is the bust dart. Now this space that we have at the hem, we're no longer making use of it, so I will just strike that out. All right, now let's proceed to label the back block as well. So here's the chest line for the back, the waist length for the back, and the hip length for the back as well, and finally the knee length. Okay, so now that we have this out of the way, let's mark our round measurements. All right, so the bust round we're working with is 37 inches. Now 37 inches divided by 4 will give us 9.25 inches. So we're marking it on the chest line. All right, so I'll proceed to make a mark on 9.25 inches, and we're adding an ease to this block. Okay, so all our round measurements, excluding the waist, we're going to add ease. Okay, so we're adding ease of 0.25 inch. So in total, we have 9.5 inches as our bust round. Okay, now on the waist, we're working with a waist round of 33.5. 33.5 divided by 4 will give us 8.3 inches, and we're adding 1.5 inches that allowance to that. All right, so I'll proceed to make a mark there. So I'll go ahead and connect the bust round measurement to the waist round measurement. Now I'll make this connection using a broken line because we are yet to mark our bust dart and close it. Okay, so I made the connection using a broken line. Now we need to mark our bust round measurement on the back. But before you mark any other thing on the back block, you will need to tighten the waist line. All right. Now I will use 0.75 inch to tighten the back waistline. Okay. Now we need to connect it from the neck depth of 1 inch to our 0.75 back tightening. All right. And here we have it. Now we need to extend this line to the hip. Okay, so we need to extend the back tightening to the hip. So from the hip line, I'm coming up by 2 inches. Okay, so we're going to extend the back tightening of 0.75 to the 2 inches that I just came up with. All right. Okay, so this is what we have. Now, I'll go ahead and highlight it. Okay. So if you leave it this way, it is okay. But most of the time, personally, I extend the back tightening from the waist length to touch the hip line. All right. Because I don't want any form of bulging around the center back. Okay. So I'll just go ahead and extend it all the way to the hip line. Okay. And this is the one I'll be working with. But like I said earlier, if you leave yours on the 2 inches above the hip line is okay as well. All right, now let's proceed to mark our bust round. So we're working with a bust round of 37 inches. 37 inches divided by 4 will give us 9.25. Now I'll start my measurements away from that back tightening. Okay, so this is the reason for tightening the back first, because in pattern drafting you need to ensure that all your measurements are complete. Now imagine that we went ahead to mark our bust round without tightening first. That tiny space you're seeing there is about 0.4 inch, and by the time you multiply it by 4, you will see what you have lost from your round measurements. So I have my tape placed on the back tightening, and I'll mark my 9.25 inches, which is my bust round divided by 4. I'll also add 0.25 ease to that. All right, now I'll go ahead and mark my waist round divided by 4. Okay, and I'm also adding 1 inch that allowance to the back. Okay, now I like to make use of 1 inch that allowance for my back, but you can use 1.5. It's all your choice. Now I'll go ahead and connect from the bust round to the waist round. Okay, so this is what we have. Now we will proceed to mark our hip round measurement. So we're working with a hip round of 44, and 44 inches divided by 4 will give us 11 inches. Now, like I mentioned earlier, we're adding ease to this block. So we're adding 0.25 ease to this. So in total, we have a hip round of 11.25 inches. Next, I'll proceed to connect from the waist round measurement to the hip round measurement. Okay, so I'll go ahead and connect this. All right, and this is what we have. Now I'll proceed to mark her hip round on the back block as well. Okay, you remember we're working with a hip round of 44. 44 inches divided by 4 is 11, and we're adding 0.25 ease to this, so making it a total of 11.25. So I'll mark this on the back block as well, and I'll proceed to connect from the waist to the hip. Okay, so I'll go ahead and connect it and we'll proceed. Now this is what we have. So let's move over to the knee. Okay, so to tighten our knee, I'm going to be making use of 2.5 inches. All right, so you can use between 1 inch to 2.5 inches or 3. It all depends on the final outcome that you want. But remember, our main aim is to have a very fitted pencil skirt without any form of fold. Okay. Okay, so I'll go ahead and mark her hip round measurements, including the ease. So I'm marking 11.25 inches on the knee line. All right, now I will go ahead and measure 2.5 inches that we're using to tighten the knee. Okay, so we're connecting from the hip round measurement to our knee measurement. Remember, I marked her hip round measurement on the knee first, and I subtracted 2.5 inches that we're using to tighten the knee. Okay, now we'll proceed to mark this exact measurement on the hem, okay, on the full length. All right, So her hip round measurement of 11.25 minus 2.5, okay, that will give us 8.75. So I'll proceed to mark exactly what we have on the knee measurement. Okay, I'll mark that on the full length of the gown, all right, and I will connect it. Now much later I will give us a little explanation to this connection, okay, and I think the time is now actually. All right, so you can decide to connect from your hip line to the full length of your gown, okay. It is entirely your choice, but you can also decide to connect from your hip to your knee and to the hem of the gown. Now the reason is this: if you connect from your hip to the hem, okay, you're going to have a little bit of excess around your knee, and that's why when you're walking it will be folding a bit. Now I'll proceed to connect from the hip to the full length, okay, or to the hem, so that you will see the excess that I am referring to. Now let's assume that you connected from your hip to your dress length, all right, just like I have done. Now can you see that space there, that extra that we have on the knee line? All right, now that extra is measuring 1.25 inches, so I'll proceed to measure it. So just imagine that you went ahead to draft your gown or your skirt and you connected from the hip to the dress length or the skirt length. You're going to have this excess around your knee, and with this you can never have a fitted pencil gown. It's not possible, because this allowance is going to be around your knee, okay, and it will take away that seamless, even pencil look that you want. All right, so that's why we are connecting from the hip to the knee and from the knee to the dress length. All right, remember, it's all your choice, and it also depends on the person you're making the outfit for. If the person does not want it to be very penciled, you can go ahead and connect from the hip to the hem. All right, so but just know that you will have that 1.25 inches or maybe more, depending on your measurements. Okay, now let's go ahead and connect our knee round measurement for the back. So the first thing you're going to do is to go ahead and measure everything you have on your hip line, and you make a mark there. Now the 2.5 inches that we're using to tighten the knee, we're going to divide it into 2 for the back. So that will give us 1.25 inches, all right, and 1.25 inches. So we're connecting from the hip, okay, to the 1.25 inches on both the side front and the center front. Remember, we're tightening with 2.5 inches, so I simply divided that into 2. Okay, so from the center back I came in by half of it, and from the side front I came in by half of it as well. Now I'll proceed to connect it. Okay, so we're connecting now from the hip to the knee. All right, now if you used 2 inches or 1.5 to tighten your knee, you are simply going to do the same thing, which is to divide your tightening figure by 2. Okay, and you do the same thing on the back. Now at the full length of the gown, we are repeating the same thing. You will first mark your hip round measurement there, and you will go ahead and come in by half of your tightening. Okay, so from the center back I'm also coming in by 1.25, and I did the same thing on the side. Okay, now I'll proceed to connect it. So we are almost done with our drafting. All right, now let me also give that explanation again on the back. So let's assume that for the back we also connected from the hip to the hem, okay, or to the dress length. So I'll go ahead and just connect it so that you will see the excess that you will have around your knee at the back as well. So if we connected from the hip to the hem, now this excess that we have by the knee is 0.6 inches. So that is the same thing that you will have on your center back as well. Now, by the time you multiply 0.6 inches times 2 for the back alone, and 1.25 in the front times 2 as well, by the time you add them together, you can see the excess that you have around your knee. And with this, you can never have a fitted pencil skirt or a fitted pencil gown, fitted pencil anything. All right, So this is it for now, and like I said, it's not compulsory. It's all about the final outcome that you want. If you don't want your knee that's fitted, you can go ahead and just connect from your hip to the hem. All right, and that's it. Now let's move over to the armhole. All right, so we need to mark our armhole curve, and we're beginning from the front. So as usual, from the chest line, you will come up by 3 inches. All right, and at that point you go inwards by 0.75. Okay, and we're going to connect from the shoulder tip to the 0.75 inch, and I'll use my curve ruler to finish the curve. All right, now you need to keep rotating your curve till you're sure of getting a perfect curve. All right, now let's move over to the back armhole. So for the back armhole, we're going to get the midpoint of the armhole line. So what we have there is 7 inches and the midpoint is 3.5. So I'll make a mark there and we'll go inwards by ½ inch. All right, so we're going to connect from the shoulder tip to the ½ inch, and I'll use my curve to finish up the armhole curve of the back. All right, so here we have it. We have plotted our armhole. Now let's go ahead and mark our dart. All right, and to mark your dart, you need your bust span. Now to get your bust span, simply divide your bust round by 8 and you subtract 1 inch. All right, but in this case, I'm working with a bust span of 4 inches. All right, so I'll go ahead and measure it on the bust point line. All right, so for your dart, you will mark it on your bust point line and not on your chest line. So I will also mark it on the waist length. All right, so I'll go ahead and mark 4 inches on the waist length, and I'll also mark 4 inches on the hip length. Okay, and I'll go ahead and connect. So we're going to use a straight line to connect our bust span. All right, now from the hip line, I'll be coming up by 2 inches. Okay, so I'll go ahead and mark my 2 inches. So I'm coming up by 2 inches above the hip line. Okay, so I will extend the bust span to stop at that 2 inches mark. Now we added 1.5 inches as our dart allowance. All right, so we're going to go ahead and divide that into 2, and that will give us 0.75 each. So on the waistline, I'll go ahead and mark 0.75 on the both sides. Now we'll connect it from the bust point line to the waist. Okay, so I'll go ahead and connect my darts, and we'll need to mark our bust dart before we forget. So we're working with a bust dart of 1 inch. All right, so from the bust point line, I'm simply coming down by 1 inch. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and connect it from the bust point to the 1 inch that we have. Okay, and here we have it. All right, so I'll proceed to finish up the darts. Okay, so I'm connecting from the 2 inches that we came up above the hip line to the waist. All right, so I'll go ahead and connect the side, and that's it for the dart. All right, now let's move over to the back. So we're also working with a bust span of 8 inches. Now we're going to start from the waistline. All right, so from the back tightening, okay, I'll go ahead and mark my 4 inches. All right, now there are 2 methods of marking your dart. You can go ahead and measure the entire thing that you have on your waistline and you divide it by 2, or you make use of your bust span. Either of them is correct, but in this case I'm making use of my bust span of 4 inches. All right, now I will go ahead and extend my tape to the center back so that I can get a straight line. Okay, and from the chest line I will mark it. All right, now from the chest line you need to come down by 1 inch. Okay, your dart is not supposed to touch your chest line. All right, now I'll proceed to connect my dart. Okay, now from the hip length, from the hip line as well, for the back we're also coming up by 2 inches. Okay, same thing that we did on the front. All right, and I'll proceed to mark my bust span measurements there. Afterwards, I'll extend the bust span, the dart line to touch the 2 inches that I just came up with. Okay, and this is it. Now, when we were drafting, we added 1 inch as our dart allowance to the back. Now, I'll simply divide that 1 inch into 2, and that will give us 0.5 inch. Okay, so I'll go ahead and just connect to the 0.5 inch on each side. All right, and I'll also extend it to the 2 inches above the hip. And here we have it. Now we will need to blend all sharp points, especially the hip and the knee area. All right, so I'll just proceed to blend those areas because we don't have any sharp or pointy parts in our body. Okay, so to blend simply means just to smoothen that part. Okay, that's what blending is. All right, and this is it. Now, in our next video, I will go ahead and alter this basic gown to an off-shoulder dress with straps. Okay, it's going to be a very detailed video and you don't want to miss it because it has a lot of updated sewing techniques and drafting techniques as well. Okay, all right, so this is it for the drafting of a basic gown. All right, so kindly subscribe to my channel, like the video, share, and give me a thumbs up if it was helpful to you. All right, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.